Thank you everyone for being here. My name is Sarah Hutcheson. I will be moderating and we have, okay, I do apologize, Michelle, is it Sedberry?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. So Michelle Sedberry here. She is the STEM coordinator at the Texas Education Agency. Michelle has a graduate certificate in multidisciplinary science focused on bilingual math and science and a master's curriculum and instruction, excuse me. She has been in education for over 20 years as a classroom science teacher, district administrator, regional science specialist, and adjunct science professor at Texas Tech University. She is published author of Creating Future Engineers Through Elementary Engineering Professional Development, and has published 4 science curriculum guides for Hank the Cowdog Ranch Life Series, which won a Tammy Silver Award in 2018. You're incredible.
I have today a presentation for you that I hope will help you see the vision of what we are doing in Texas. Just 2 years ago, this work began in Texas, and so I'm very excited to be a part of it, and very excited to be able to share with you what we're doing here. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. This information will be provided to you. You'll have a recording. You'll also have this slide deck, and there's lots of data in here and information that I'm going to talk through with you in hopes that you will be able to share this information as you advocate for your STEM program and the reason you need that at wherever you are representing, whatever stakeholder group you represent. So we're going to cover nationally where Texas sits in our national landscape. I'll give you some information specifically about Texas. And then I'll drill down into Region 13. We're here at the Greater Austin STEM ecosystem today. Most of you are going to be from this Region 13 area, so I'm going to drill into that data a little bit. And then I'm going to share with you our pre-K-12 STEM education vision for Texas, what we hope to roll out with all of our K-12 schools in formal education. For those of you that may not be in an ISD or a charter school or private school, you may not hear about this information in your organization. So I want to make sure you know kind of where we're going as a state. We're going to be rolling out a lot of exciting pieces this year, so I'm excited to share that with you. And then at the end, I'm going to show you some resources that any of you can use and different opportunities where you can get involved. So let's look nationally. Briefly, I want to show you kind of where we are as a nation. In 2010, we had a very organized push to get aligned in K-12 STEM education. And so President Obama led this charge. We had the K-12 Education and STEM for America's Future report came out that really defined things for the nation and gave us a direction. In 2015, after the nation had kind of played with some ideas and experimented with different STEM programming within their states, Obama put out a 10-year vision. And this vision really pointed us all in the same direction. This was the first time in the nation we had been given a direction to go in STEM. So it was an important moment for the country. In 2018, President Trump brought in 2 members from each state to represent their state in forming a 5-year STEM plan. Back from 2015 to 2018, you can imagine the changes in job landscapes, the changes in STEM. So this 5-year plan updated the nation, and it is commonly called the North Star. It gave us all, again, a direction to head. And so you can read about that report, and I'll put that title on the next slide. But this was a big moment because it was the first time collectively all the states had been brought to the table to discuss STEM and STEM education in a K-12 setting. Currently, since that report came out in 2018, we have 49 states across the nation who have adopted a K-12 strategic STEM plan and have embedded STEM instruction into core academics, so into science, math, reading, and social studies. So each state has done it a little bit different. Most have anchored into science. And you may wonder, who is the state that hasn't done it? And it is Texas. Obviously, this is not an area we want to be last in. Our state agency hired my position 2 years ago in order to solve for this, to start developing a K-12 program. We are the last in the nation to come to the table, which means we have the opportunity to learn from every other state's implementation plan and what worked and what didn't work, so that we can develop a plan that is based on best practices and 10 years worth of data of what we've seen other people do. So that's currently underway, and we're going to be starting to roll part of that out this next year. So this is the name of that article, Charting a Course for Success, America's Strategy for STEM Education. If you are in a STEM role, administrative, you run nonprofit, informal STEM programs, higher ed programs, this is a report you need to read. It is a lot of great information, as well as visuals and things that you can use as talking points and presentations. But you're also going to find that it really points everyone in the nation in the same direction. And this is very important that we align our programming. So when our students in Texas, if they decide to move to another state, they will have been prepared in the same ways as other students from other states. So our main goals are to build strong foundations in STEM literacy, to increase diversity and equity and inclusion in STEM, and to prepare our STEM workforce for the future. And I'm going to share some data about Texas in particular in a moment. There are 3 buckets of work that is covered in this report. The first is about partnerships. You'll notice number 1, kind of a shout out to our ecosystems, is to foster STEM ecosystems. In my research, the one thing that kept consistently coming up in states where STEM programming was very successful were states that were involved in the ecosystem. As you know, there's a national ecosystem. The Greater Austin STEM ecosystem was one of those founding ecosystems in that national group. We now have 3 sister ecosystems in Texas. We have our Alamo ecosystem, the Greater Austin STEM ecosystem, and then the state agency has just joined in April 2018 as the Texas ecosystem. And so we are really making an effort in Texas to connect all of our stakeholders together so that we can truly have this inclusive STEM programming. And so we feel like in Texas, we're doing the first bucket very well. Not all states can say that. So that's something that I think people are taking note of in Texas. We also have our work-based learning program, K-12, that is rolling out. And so you'll see more information about that in the future, but really looking at in Texas, we want work-based learning to be a continuum of experiences starting in elementary and not just waiting until a student is in 8th grade and selecting their endorsement. So really changing the mindset there. The second bucket is really focused on our instruction. How are we approaching instruction? We want that to be integrated. And so you will see that in our Texas plan. And the last bucket in this national report is around building conceptual literacy, really looking at digital literacy in students, computational thinking, and really expanding the digital platforms that our students are using. We were kind of falling behind in this area in Texas, honestly, and COVID-19 has catapulted us forward in this. So I wouldn't say we are perfect at it, but we are definitely learning how to do blended instruction. I know there's been some sessions on that already today at this conference, but the digital platforms, we're going to become more and more familiar with those in this next year and probably beyond. All right, let me click here. All right, so looking at Texas. A little bit of data so you know where we are as a state as far as STEM careers. Right now in Texas, our STEM jobs will earn our students more money, and there is more growth opportunity in Texas in STEM. We are at 20%. We are behind California. They're the only state beating us in growth out of the entire nation. Our three main areas of growth are in computing, engineering, and advanced manufacturing. A lot of our data in STEM has not slowed down because of COVID-19. And so when we look at our data, of course, everything is shifting here, right, you know, as we speak. But in these areas with, in our highest growth and really our areas of STEM in Texas that are high wage and our students have a lot of opportunity in, those have not seen as big an impact as some industries industries have. Our growth in other job areas are at 15%. When we look at earnings, keep in mind that the Texas Education Agency never looks at average earnings. We always look at median. So we are throwing out the lowest and the highest salaries in a range so that we have a more accurate assessment and information to provide our students. So our median earning in Texas STEM jobs is about $38 an hour. For jobs that are non-STEM, that's about $18 an hour. And so when you look at the difference there, our students can potentially earn $20 more an hour just by seeking out those STEM fields. When we look at gender gap, this is something, of course, we always want to be mindful of when we are thinking about programming. And one, I think, of the biggest strengths that the Greater Austin STEM ecosystem has is Trisha Berry's work in really looking at the gender gap in our different programs and really how to appeal to young women and get them interested in STEM. When we look at the national data for Texas, this is from the National Labor Bureau, they show for computing, our men is the purple line here. Blue is our female line. You can see we're not making a lot of gains, a little bit of a gain, but not a lot in closing that gap in computing. The other area that we are fastest growing in is engineering, and you can see this gap is even wider here. Our men is the lime green line at the top, our females down at the bottom. And look how straight this line is for engineering. A little uptick here at the end, not much, and not near at the extreme rate of our men. And so when we are looking at STEM programming in Texas, one thing that we really want to focus on is an integrated approach, not looking at STEM in silos. And what that means is, you know, focusing on your science program or in your coding programs, technology programs, or in just your mathematics programs. But how do we bring all of that together to solve problems? And teaching students these critical thinking skills young is what we are seeing is the biggest payoff to make sure that your students are building those STEM skills. And so if all students are learning this type of thinking, how to solve problems through design, then we should see more females take an interest in engineering. And so we'll see how that plays out in the future, but that is our hope as we look at this data and plan for future programming. So looking at our state, the Texas Workforce Commission has made a prediction that Texas is expected to have the second highest percentage of the nation's future STEM job opportunities. And so, of course, my question was who's number one? And I shared with you, not only does California beat us in our wages, they also are the fastest growing in the nation. We are number 2. So if you look at this national map here of the color coding, the dark blue states are the fastest growing STEM states in the nation. So you will see that Texas is among those dark blue states. And then when you put that into perspective of what are we currently doing to prepare our students, every student, to enter a STEM career, the answer is we don't have a unified state plan. Every district's kind of on their own. We have lots of grassroots STEM programming going on, but again, that's not for all students. It's for students who self-select into those programs. So in looking at this, this is problematic. This is problematic data that has to be addressed. I did a listening tour my first year in this position in 2018-19 and interviewed each region, went out and spoke to them and asked, where is STEM programming happening in your district? Oftentimes the answer was CTE. So we had a strong STEM presence in the high school level in CTE programming. And that's, of course, your engineering courses, your biomedical courses, manufacturing, and some of these other career clusters that have a STEM focus. So that's great. But we want to prepare all students, not just CTE students. We also saw that we had a lot of pull-out programs for GT students, or our top performing students. So for instance, in a district, the GT program might be STEM education. So the students would go to a STEM class a couple of times a week and get STEM instruction. Again, not for all, just for some of our students. And then we saw in isolated places where they truly had a K-12 STEM integrated program. They were just pockets across the state. It was not widespread, but in those districts, all students were getting STEM education. So in looking at this, you know, after a year of research and talking to people, it was an easy conclusion that Texas has no unified approach. And so we really, that's where we needed to start, was to define our programs. So the big takeaway from that listening tour is the statement right down here. We have to shift our focus to all students, or we're not going to be able to meet the demand that we're seeing in the rapid growth towards STEM occupations. So here are some data points just for Texas. For MiddleSkill STEM jobs, if you have not played around in a lot of labor market information, a MiddleSkill STEM job is any job requiring an associate's degree or less. So you do not need a bachelor's degree, you do not need a doctorate degree for a MiddleSkill STEM job. It's an associate's degree or less. Usually they do require a high school diploma, but after that it's industry-based certifications or certificates, level 1, level 2 certificates, or some college, not all require graduation from college, and then up to associates. So more than 60% of our middle skill jobs require 6 months or less of formal classroom training, which means that in high school, a student could take a class and potentially earn a industry-based certification right there in school and enter into a middle skill STEM position. So that about 60% of those are going to be 6 months or less. STEM middle skill job wages in Texas range from $35,000 to $95,000, and those are entry level wages. Remember, that's an associate's degree or less. The demand for middle skill workers with STEM related training continues to increase every year, and the jobs remain vacant. We currently we don't have a pipeline for these jobs. And you all being from the Austin area, you know, we have people moving here every day to fill these jobs. Texas is one of the unusual places where you can make very high wages in a middle skill STEM job. And so we are seeing many people leave from California, move here for our jobs, and we're also seeing an uptake in people from the New York area moving here to fill these STEM jobs because they're open, and we don't have skilled workers currently to fill those positions. The potential earnings for STEM occupations is double that of other jobs in Texas. We talked about that number a moment ago. If a student is able to go through and get an associate's degree in STEM, they will earn between $75,000 and $100,000 for their wages, which is greater than if they went to school and got a bachelor's or master's degree in a non-STEM field. And so you can see again, by giving information to our students and helping them in their career pathway and making wise choices in those pathways can unlock life-changing wages for our students. Employment in STEM jobs is only going to continue to increase over the next decade. I told you before, nationally, the 3 areas that were identified in Texas as fastest growing were computing, engineering, and advanced manufacturing. We always triangulate all of our data at the Texas Education Agency to make sure that we are presenting accurate information. This information is from the Texas Workforce Commission, and you see many of these numbers I shared earlier were duplicated here. They found the exact same thing. So when we look at Texas and we look at the snapshot of what is available, this data is from last year, so it is already out of date. The openings are already more than they were when I took this snapshot last year. But we deal in all occupational SOC codes, and a SOC code is how careers are nationally coded. There are other countries that also use the same SOC coding, but there's about 800 different occupations. An occupation might be doctor, and then under that occupation, there are many related occupations, but the main, we call it a tent pole, would be doctor. And so that's counted as one SOC code. So there are 149 of those 800 SOC codes that are identified as STEM tent poles. And so remember, under each of those 149, there's a whole branch of occupations that are connected to that. In the main occupational SOC codes, we had over 162,149, and that was as of last year. That number has almost reached 300,000 now, and these represent unfilled positions. So like I said, this is a growing number, and almost every day this number just gets bigger and bigger. Of those 149, 57 of those are middle skill STEM jobs that we just discussed. So there are going to be some of those 149 that require a bachelor's degree, master's degree, or doctorate degree. But 57 of those don't. They require an associate's degree or less. Of those occupations, they represented about 82,874 openings. And so, again, that number is only larger now. This was taken in 2019. And we do this study every 2 years. So we'll have additional information will come out the next time we run these numbers. People also ask a lot, because I'm the STEM coordinator, why is the state agency not STEAM? You know, do you just not like fine arts, or what's the deal? And I can say I'm married to a professional artist, so I do value art. The reason we have STEM and not STEAM is because we align all programming to careers. And so when you look at the SOC codes, there are STEM SOC codes, there are not STEAM SOC codes. So when we align our programs, we want our students to know, if you are in this line of programming, these are the careers that this leads to. And these are the SOC codes, and these are the job skills that are needed. And that information is all tracked through these SOC codes. So as a state agency, that is the reason. As a district, if you wanted to have a STEAM program and really bring in the fine arts components, absolutely, that is fine. That is the reason, though, that the state agency has a STEM program. Looking at this data, one thing that I asked the Texas Workforce Commission is, I want to know, like, if we're the second fastest growing, what is the number? We have 20% growth. What is that number going to be in 2026? And the number is staggering. 1.9 million STEM jobs in Texas unfilled in 2026. So that really creates urgency on what we have been doing, and a siloed STEM approach, only really addressing STEM in high school, is not enough. It hasn't been enough, and it certainly isn't going to be enough to get us to where we need to be in 2026 to fill these job openings in Texas. So looking at our pipeline, what does this look like? I sent this to Tricia this morning and said, we've got new data in, so I want to update the presentation so you guys are the first to see this in Texas. Our 8th graders, our current high school cohort of 4-year students, our 8th graders that selected STEM endorsements, there were 609,705. So that's a pretty good number of our 8th graders that said, you know, STEM is what I like. That's where that's what I want to work in. That's the career I want to pursue. Looking at our 17-18 data, and the state agency lags a little bit in data. We run about a year behind. So you guys report, we process, and then we get that data out publicly, usually about a year behind. So in 17-18, we had about 275,000 students graduate with a STEM endorsement. In 18-19, we had about 268,000, nearly 269,000 that graduated with STEM endorsements. That's the most current information that we have. That number was down a little bit. So we'll see what 19-20 number looks like when it comes out. So this is way better than the data that we had previously. So we are doing better. You can see the efforts that we've made in the last 2 years. We are starting to see the results of that. Of course, that bullseye there is where we're going. 2026, we need 1.9 million skilled workers to fill the jobs. So we're not there. We're climbing the ladder here. To give you an idea, our previous data that we had before this was 6,000 graduates. And so you can see we've made tremendous gains in this area. We still have a pretty leaky pipeline. 609,000 saying they want a STEM endorsement and only graduating, you know, around 270-ish. We definitely are losing a lot of students. And so that's what we are really trying to get to the bottom of now. Where is the leak in our pipeline? Do we have students that just change their mind? Do we have students that feel like they don't have the foundational skills to finish out their programming in high school? So we need to find out what those areas are and address those. So looking at Region 13, when we look at the education of Region 13, anything that is gold and below here are our middle skill STEM, would be eligible for middle skill STEM jobs. So you see a lot of our population here in the Region 13 area is in that middle skill range. This is pretty unusual, that we have a lot of folks here in the Region 13 area with bachelor's and graduate degrees. And so depending on what those are in, of course, would depend on what field they are in. But those wages, of course, are much higher than just the middle skill STEM wages. But you can see from this data that we have a lot of potential for our students here in the Region 13 area. Looking at our industry data, the largest industry that we have in the Region 13 area, Austin area, is going to be government. That makes sense because all of our government buildings are here. You can see on these data reports, and I can share this, the overall Texas data report as well as the Region 13 data report with Trish to send out to you. But these gray lines here on the report represent our national averages. And then the blue lines represent Region 13. And these are done by Education Service Center regions. So anybody that is grouped within Region 13 would be included in these blue lines. But when you look here at these top ones, they're STEM fields. So there are lots of STEM opportunities. When you look at food services, retail, healthcare, these right here are going to be very, very high in computing, cybersecurity. So remember that cybersecurity and computer science are embedded within many of these industries. So when you're looking at data and sharing that with students, that's something to remember to share with them. Top growing industries. These STEM fields in silos. So looking at the science fields, math fields, the technical computing fields are the fastest growing here in the Region 13 area. We do not see that everywhere. So this is unique to our area. Again, healthcare, the construction area, if you've been downtown, that probably resonates with you. Information, manufacturing, all of these here on this are going to be our top growing in Region 13. Top earnings, mining and quarrying, oil and gas came up #1, utilities, and then computing. That information, big data is third on the list, and then right under there, those STEM fields. So these make a lot of sense in our area, and we don't see that in all reports. This is unique to our area. So what is our vision moving forward? How are we going to address this data and have it inform our choices? So the first thing that we had to do as a state agency is define what STEM is and what it is not. And as a state, agree on this. So during the listening tour, we asked a lot of questions, we got a lot of feedback so that we would have a united approach to addressing STEM. So one thing that was identified is that STEM education is a way of thinking about content. So it's the way we deliver content, and any teacher can be a STEM teacher by the way they deliver their content. It's a method of delivering integrated content. So if you're a reading teacher, you can do an engineering design challenge alongside the book that you're reading. So it truly is a way of teaching. It is addressing real world problems and presenting that as part of your curriculum. So students are taking what they know, applying it to the problem that they are solving, and then coming up with a solution. And in that process, we know that design is a very big component of that. User experience, if something is not pretty, people might not buy it. And so all of those design thinking components come in to this as well. We are teaching STEM fluency skills that are transferable. So if we have students that STEM isn't their thing, that is not what they want to do, that's okay. These skills that they're learning through doing design challenges are transferable to any industry, and they are important employability skills that we see and hear from business and industry that they desire. STEM education is not a course or a program. So offering a class at your school is not STEM education. Might be a STEM class, but that is not what we're looking at when we look at a statewide education program. We're looking much bigger. If we have only STEM classes offered at some schools, those classes might contain 20 students. There might be offered twice a day, so 40 students of the total population at that school. It's not enough. We have to help all of our students gain these skills if we really want to be prepared to fill these occupations in the future. Our goal is not turning all students into engineers. Our goal is turning all students into critical thinkers. And so when we think about the way that we are delivering content, are we spoon feeding students? Are we having them engage in the content through inquiry and through design challenges so that they are really learning the content at a deep level? It's relevant to them and they can apply it when asked to in other situations. STEM education is not a buzzword or short-term fad. I hear this a whole lot. Well, we'll just wait a couple of years and TEA will move on to, you know, their next thing. STEM is not going away. We've seen in the nation grow every year. It grows across the nation. We are 10 years behind. So this isn't something that's going away, and it really is a critical need if we're going to prepare our students in Texas. So our definition moving forward, we have defined STEM for the first time ever in the state of Texas. So STEM education is a method of hands-on teaching and learning where students learn to apply academic content by creatively solving real-world problems with innovative design-based thinking to prepare students for future career opportunities. And so as we talk about STEM moving forward in the state, this is the definition that we will use and align our STEM programming to. Our goals are aligned to the national goals. We want it to be equitable across the state. It should not matter where a student lives, whether they get to learn these STEM practices. We want to increase student outcomes and prepare all students for future STEM careers. And we want to vertically align from elementary to high school. So we are building the strong foundation in our students so they're ready for the high-level high school courses. And then when they move into higher ed, they're prepared for the courses that they are going to be taking there. So when we look at the gold standard of our programming, the first thing Texans said is they wanted an integrated approach. They called out specifically these core content areas and that they wanted STEM embedded into core and not as a separate piece. And just so you know, this is the data we collected on the listening tour. So in this column to the left, this is the strongest comments that were made. So this column represents about 7,000 voices here. And then they go in order of the most to the least. And of course, there were lots that did not make top 5. The number 2 thing was horizontally aligned and vertically aligned, so that they wanted cross-curricular experiences for students, but also vertically aligned so that we don't have a 2nd grader building a bridge, and then in 4th grade building a bridge, and then in 8th grade building a bridge. They wanted those experiences to scaffold over time and increase in complexity. Number 3 on the list was equitable for all students. We had several things brought up here: gender, race, and ability level. We brought parents in during the listening tour, and we did not have the parents of GT students who showed up. We had parents of our special ed population. We had parents of ELL students who said, you know, it's not fair our students aren't getting to participate in these programs because they're not the top at the school. They deserve to learn these skills too. And so we really had a strong voice about ability level, and it should be for all students. The fluency skills that were called out were the 4 C's of 21st century learning. So you see those listed here. And then in addition, we had resilience brought up by all stakeholder groups. By our business, industry, and higher ed folks, we heard promptness, adaptability, and time management were very important. And they were skills that they felt were lacking in our Texas students and need help in the formal ed setting to build those skills in our students. The most popular instructional method was project or problem-based learning. Although the state is not going to dictate how STEM learning looks at your campus, so that's the most popular, so I'm reporting out the data, but engineering design challenges are in research are just as effective and take less time in the classroom to do. So our framework is released. You can find it on our website. There are 6 domains to building a strong K-12 STEM program. Each domain is broken down into high quality indicators. So you can pull that down from our website and look at it and look at your programming and see where your strengths are. You'll notice also in these purple bars that we have developed tools to support you in these different domains. So we have 3 domains here, and we have the other 4, 5, and 6 here. You'll notice the largest area is instructional components, because that's where we see a lot of the STEM pieces fall under this instructional component. and then all of the tools that support in that. When we look at our STEM programming, we want to provide flexibility to the state of Texas, because we do know that not every district is the same, and it's not one size fits all, won't work. So there are 4 models that are commonly used across the nation that are very successful. We will adopt the same 4 models. There's the starting point, which is an exploratory model. So if your school has not ever done any STEM programming, this would be the logical first step. Events are standalone. They're not connected to content. They are not doing TEKS. So this would be like a code night. Kids can come to code night, they can learn about coding, but it really is a standalone event. The next level is an introductory or developing model. And this is where STEM experiences are limited to the number of students. They are anchored in a content area, and they might be aligned to TEKS. So this really is not the starting point, but the starting point of a program that is really going to be addressing student needs. So at this developing level, this might be a STEM elective. It could be a STEM club after school. So this is why it's a limited number of students, because not everyone, it's not being offered to everyone, but it's a starting place. Partial immersion is where I would like to see most of our schools at by 2026. It will take time to get to a partial immersion. This is an intermediate model. STEM experiences here are embedded regularly. So if you are doing the 5E model, STEM design challenges are commonly embedded into the elaborate E of the 5E. So every time you do a 5E, you do a design challenge. So these are very purposeful and regular. It could also be every 6 weeks or every 9-week grading period, you do 1 design challenge. That would also qualify as regular. These would always be tied to TEKS and be cross-curricular. So again, these STEM experiences would be meaningful to students and build their academic knowledge. So that's a partial. Full immersion, I won't go a lot into, but usually these are standalone schools. Typically, they are like a magnet type school. So a parent would say, I want my child to go to a STEM school that does not look like a traditional school. That would be a full immersion campus. Definitely, those exist in Texas. Some of the coolest places I have visited have been full immersion, but that's not going to be for everybody. That's just, it's not realistic for every school in Texas, but a partial immersion is a realistic option. There's a tool to help you figure out where you're at in the progression. So for each high quality indicator, it breaks down, here's what this looks like. If this is where you're at, then on this high quality indicator, you are at the starting point. Or, hey, you know what? You're knocking it out of the park. This high quality indicator, you're at the most advanced level you can be. And so this tool just helps you figure out as a campus, where are you? Where do you want to be? And then how do you get there? And so if you're at the introductory level, you can read the next step and see what it would take to get to the next level. Those tools that I mentioned are in the toolkit. So if you look on a STEM website on TEA, you will see that there is a section for planning tools. This is where you'll see the model identification guide. There's a program planning guide, leadership roles and responsibilities, sustainability. If you're a campus leader and you're thinking about how do you do this long term. If you're just starting out, there's a needs assessment there for you. For implementation tools, this is for our educators here on the line. These tools help you transform your classroom from more of a teacher-led classroom to more of a student-led classroom. The STEM teaching and learning progression will give you step-by-steps of how do you make your classroom more student-centered. There's lots of reflection guides in here. There's STEM fluency rubrics, so you can figure out where your students are in their STEM skills and how to grow them in those skills. There's an organizer for making an integrated cross-curricular lesson. This graphic organizer has been used in a couple of states and with rave reviews, so we adapted that for Texas for you guys. There's some surveys here that you can get a read on where you're at as a district for your, or even a campus in STEM. There's a planning guide down here. So if you're looking for a instructional planning guide that takes the 5E lesson model and incorporates engineering into that you might want to check out. And then for our administrators, for those of you that are starting to have some STEM programming at your school, there's a STEM walkthrough tool that was just released for you. It is aligned to the planning guide, but it's a quick little form that you can fill out when you do an observation and give feedback to the instructor of the class. For STEM locally, you'll find lots of resources through our Texas ecosystem. This is what the brand looks like. So you'll see that from time to time. Trish will send out different things to you guys in the ecosystem. So when you see this logo, you know that that is from the state agency. We have some resources. You are welcome to go onto our website and get and all of the toolkit, of course, but these are ecosystem resources that we've worked on this last year. This is a continuum of experiences for all stakeholders. So here are some ideas for formal educators, informal educators, and then family events of how to get your families involved. So just ideas, these are just samples, but the goal of this was to have a column for pre-K through 2. And these are some things that you could do at your campus in each of these grade levels, and it builds through the years. So there are some things that might be on the second grade list here that you could do in 3-5. Absolutely. So this is just a suggestion of how experiences can be laid out, but they can be moved all around. This is just intended to be a springboard for you. Another tool is the family engagement ideas. And so you'll notice that in each category, there are different ideas for if you're wanting to get families involved in the district, or you're wanting family involvement in other venues. There's 2 pages of ideas of what you could do to increase that engagement. And then we just put out STEM engagement ideas for an ecosystem. And this one is broken down by stakeholder groups. So this is formal ed, we have informal, we have businesses, we have higher ed. So ideas of ways that you can get your ecosystem involved. And then if you're wanting to plan a STEM event in your area and you're not an event planner, we just released a STEM event planning guide. And so it breaks down everything that you need to kind of think through as you are hosting an in-person STEM event. When we started designing this, the whole virtual thing was not a thing. So this would be for in-person, and perhaps we need to work on a STEM event planning guide for virtual experiences, but this one will be in person. A couple of things we have rolling out right now, just next week, we have our K-8 mobile STEM laboratory that is going to be touring Texas for the next 2 years. So if you are at a school district and you are interested in this, make sure and go to the STEM website, and you can get more information about the mobile lab. All spots are filled for this year. We're visiting 45 different districts this year. But for the second year, you could sign up for that and be watching when it comes to your region. You may see it in the area. Also, our Lone Star STEM grants, the last round of 612 grants are ending September 7th. So that deadline is coming. If you're interested in opening a pathway in computer science or cybersecurity, would love for you to apply. There's more information, of course, on the STEM website, so you can go there to find out more information about that. All right, so I know that's a lot of information, so I'm going to pull up the chat. I know we are right at time. So it looks like, thank you, Laura, for sharing the post for the STEM framework. All of everything is located on the STEM website. So if you go to TEA and go to just our tea.texas.gov, you can, in the search bar, type in STEM. It'll take you to the web page, and everything is there for you for the family engagement stuff and all the tools that I showed you. Let me go back. Roxanne, I don't have data on why we have a decrease in STEM endorsements. You know, our data at the agency is somewhat limited right now. So I am working with the education service centers to get data from each district. They're going to report that data up to me. And we're hoping to get a better lens of what's going on with STEM in Texas. Also, my Lone Star STEM campuses are gathering data on their pipelines, and I hope to see trends. We have 3 cohorts of 30 campuses. So between the 90 campuses, I'm hoping to really see trends that emerge on this leaky pipeline that we have in Texas. Let's see, does the data track retention by demographic groups? It currently does not. This is one of the things that we are working on with the Lone Star STEM grant, and potentially that is something that we will be able to track. We do track it in our college career readiness school models, but we do not have a way to track it in just general ISDs. And so that would be something that would have to be approved at much higher levels than I to request that type of data from a school district. So potentially we can move in that direction, but right now we don't have a way to do that. Where can we find this data? A lot of this is internal data that we have pulled for STEM programming. You'll have a copy of this presentation, so you'll have that data there. We also have in the TEA website, there is some data that's available publicly, but not a whole lot. So most of this will be found through presentations that different employees give and through those slide decks. Where are work-based resources available via TEA or CTE? Currently, neither. We are working on work-based learning resources. Those have not been posted at this time. We are using them with our Lone Star STEM grantees. We're also using them in the college career readiness school models. So those are available in those areas. But those are resources we're still developing. So they haven't not been put public yet. All right. There's a lot of talking. Thank you all for joining today. This is my email. Please reach out to me. I love to talk to folks from the field about STEM. So if you have questions, suggestions, if you can't find something on the website, just drop me an email, and I'm happy to answer those and help get you the information that you need.